We'll have our final panel beginning now, which will be a summary and final reaction panel. It will be shorter than the panels that we've had thus far. So we may have very little and perhaps no time for questions and answers. We'll just see how our time goes once our presenters are finished. And then we have the privilege of hearing Dr. Leith Anderson of the National Association of Evangelicals, Professor Dr. John DeGioia, President of Georgetown University, and His Excellency Professor Dr. Sayed Hossein Nasr for our keynotes, after which time we'll take a break. Let me just briefly introduce our panelists this morning. It's really wonderful to see all of you here. I'm just looking down at Ayatollah Yeravani and very much appreciative of him being here and all of you. Really a privilege. Our first panelist is Rabbi Douglas Krantz of Congregation B'nai Yisrael in Armonk, New York. We're very pleased to have him here. Following Rabbi Krantz will be Dr. Mohammed Alouini Sharif, head of the European Academy of Islamic Culture and Sciences in Brussels, Belgium, followed by Reverend Dr. Geoffrey Tunnicliffe, International Director and CEO of the World Evangelical Alliance, and then finally Dr. Mohammed Bishari, President of the Federal Society for Muslims in France, the General Secretary of European Islamic Conference in France, and a member of the International Fiqh Academy, will be presenting on behalf of His Excellency Professor Dr. Abdelkebir Alaoui Medeghri, the Director General of Bait Mal Al-Quds Agency of the Al-Quds Fund and former Minister of Religious Affairs in Morocco. So with no further ado, I'll turn the microphone over to Rabbi Krantz, and I'll ask our speakers to speak from the podium. I think it's easier for us all to hear and to see if we do that.
Thank you. First of all, I thank all of those who convened these extraordinary meetings for all of us to share our thoughts. I begin from the book of Proverbs, Kamayim hapanim lapanim, ken lev ha'adam la'adam. As in water, face answers to face, so is the heart of a human to a human. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Adonai. In the rabbinic commentary, the noted and influential Rabbi Akiba ben Joseph stated that the commandment to love our neighbors as ourselves, Zeh klal hagadol, this is the greatest principle of the Torah. We have neighbors. Lo tov heyot ha'adam levado, it is not good that Adam be alone. We know that being alone, solitary confinement, is the worst punishment that can be imposed upon any human being. We live with others. We live with complex systems for getting along with immediate family, with relatives, neighbors, and strangers. I would share with you three thoughts. First, about neighborliness in the ancient world. Second, some contrasts and comparisons in lifestyles between the ancient world and where we live today, both in apartment buildings and in individual dwellings. Third, explore two separate, but I believe related concepts: the modern aphorism that high walls make good neighbors, and the significant qualifications of the commandment to love your neighbor as yourself. In the ancient world, families lived as clans in close quarters. If families lived in a small village or town that had a wall, they shared that common wall. If they lived in tents, they lived in quarters divided by the thickness of animal skins. Neighbors were dependent on one another for food, water, and ensuring mutual safety. Their lives centered on food, shelter, and clothing. They had to share the sources of water. Food was farmed collectively. Hunting was a shared experience, not for sport, but for survival. All who lived nearby shared a common set of vulnerabilities: disease, marauders, difficult weather, be there a flood or a drought, a cold spell, or a burdensome and unbearable heat wave. We cannot fully appreciate how little those who lived in ancient times knew about the world around them. They knew the seasons, but not what was coming the next day by way of an unexpected storm, rain or snow or sand. Yet there were systems of effective dependency by which neighbors had to support one another for any of them to survive. They lived with the necessity of sharing. They worked for the common good. Disputes between neighbors living in close quarters had to be settled. Forgiveness had to be granted to those who made unconscionable blunders. A subset of loving your neighbor as yourself in rabbinics are all of the requirements that we be forgiving of an honest penitent. If our neighbors committed an egregious act, made amends as fast as she or he could, then our tradition demanded that forgiveness be granted. Forgiveness was not then and is not now an act of approval, rather a necessary survival mechanism for a community of mutually dependent men, women, and children. Simply to survive, they had to love one another. For those who live in apartments in New York City or have spent time in them, when we get off the elevator on our floor, we know who is cooking and what they are cooking. Cooking smells permeate the shared hallway. If there is a party 5 apartments down from us, we know there are people coming and going in and out of our elevator. We may or may not have been invited to the party, but we share the music and the loud conversation. If our neighbors upstairs are inconsiderate, we hear them walking on the floor loudly late at night. If the pipes in our apartment break, our neighbors below are flooded. Surely, in large apartment buildings, we may be aware of our neighbors without actually even knowing them. We may know who they are, we may exchange a pleasantry, or we may be unpleasantly estranged from our neighbor. In the modern apartment in a large city, doors are always locked. Yes, in some apartments, and here I don't want to overstate the reality, people do help each other and they do act neighborly, especially in times of unusual need. We know that on September 11th, 2001, the real story, the significant story, was about how New Yorkers responded to each other and how the world responded to New York in a single act of neighborliness that remains, from my perspective, the untold and more significant narrative of September 11th. The act of 12 criminals was met by an affirmation of love for our neighbors in the suburbs, where we may not see our neighbors for months at a time. Sometimes we never speak to the people across the street. In our modern world, we don't share our differences with our neighbors by being forgiving. We live in a town with noise ordinances and laws of protection. The police are called in to settle disputes between neighbors. Doors are locked. Sometimes hearts are locked. Where I live, we are dependent on water that comes from underground wells. Where I live, the underground water runs in the direction of our house from across the street. What goes into the soil across the street comes up in my well. We are dependent on one another, whether we choose to embrace that reality or not. And in some other ways, we are less directly dependent on our neighbors in the suburbs. We know them less, and we love them less. In the modern world, there is a cliche that has affected our relationship with our neighbors. The aphorism, "High walls make good neighbors," is, to my mind, dangerous. High walls, and I refer here to physical walls, remind me of the rabbinic teaching about when Moses was instructing the spies to scout out the land of Canaan. Moses asked the scouts to determine if the villages were strong or weak. Our rabbinic tradition teaches us that if the villages were fortified, then the people who lived in them were timid, weak of heart, lacking in courage. But if the cities were open, accessible to wayfarers, then the people who lived in them were courageous and strong. High walls breed timidity, fear, and estrangement. Openness is the source of our courage, faith, and trust in the capacity to love our neighbors and the strangers with all of our hearts. And because we're here at Yale, I am reminded of an inscription on the tombstone at the Grove Street Cemetery here in New Haven. Kingman Brewster's tombstone underneath a hazel tree is inscribed with a quotation attributed to him. "The presumption of innocence is not just a legal concept. In commonplace terms, it represents the generosity of spirit which assumes the best and not the worst in the stranger." Assume the best. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself is a qualified statement. We are not to love our neighbors more than we love ourselves. And I have been thinking as I approach these moments about a difficult but what I hope is an honest self-appraisal. And that is that I don't love all that there is about me all of the time. I don't love my own materialism. I don't love that I sometimes take more than I give. I don't love my predatory instincts to protect my children beyond the needs of my neighbor's children. I know that I am not in every way an admirable person. My wife is here and she will tell you that I'm not always easy to live with. I know that the rabbi who stands at the pulpit of congregation in B'nai Israel in Armonk, New York, is not a paragon of virtue. Rather, I am simply flesh and blood. I am human. I am not an idealized manifestation of the great and noble religious tradition, Jewish religious tradition, so central to my personhood. Ultimately, like all of the rest of you, I must look in the mirror. And when we see our faces in the mirror, we know that we live in a world that is of the heart and for the heart. And so we must endeavor to love our neighbor and to love ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Krantz. We'll now call up Dr. Mohammed Alouini al-Sharif.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونستعينه ونصلي على سيدنا محمد رسول رب العالمين وعلى سائر الأنبياء والمرسلين وعن الصحابة والآل والصحابة أجمعين. وبعد، أيها الملأ الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
May God's peace be upon you all. At the outset of my brief intervention about the summaries of this conference, I would like to remind you all of the starting points and the motives that we have taken, in addition to the efforts that were made before the convening of the conference and the goals that were set about the conference. That after the 11 September events and even before 11 September events, severe attacks were launched against Islam, and violent attacks were also launched against its sacred beliefs and traditions. Hatred campaigns were also launched against Islam, and we have seen this especially in the last few years. And of course, as a result of that, an elite group of Muslim and Christian thinkers and scholars have tried to solve this problem, and thus we have seen the initiative of the historical document, let's come to a common word between us. The Muslim scholars and the Christian scholars in this document called for joining our efforts together and meeting together to agree on certain points, such as loving God and loving neighbor. And because of the grace and mercy of God, that the events and the discussions of this document had a great positive effects in the Muslim and Christian circles. The effect of the Common Word document has received great success, because those who prepared the document and spread it were able to recruit a lot of Christian thinkers and scholars. More than 300 of these Christian scholars opposed the Crusaders and all the damages that the Crusaders have done in the name of fighting terrorism. This response indeed was a positive and great step for bringing the two religions closer, and it embodied the solid ground that will lead to achieving our goals and to the goals of all humanity, which is the prevalence of peace in the world. And the result of following up this dialogue between the two religions and holding many meetings and conferences, there was practical application, which is the convening of this conference, which we consider one of the first fruit of this meeting together. We also consider that this conference has achieved, with the grace of God, has achieved some of its goals, some of which is to bridge the gap between the two religions and to allow both the Christians and the Muslims to express themselves. The participants in this conference were able also to discuss some of these issues, like loving God, loving love of God to man, loving neighbors, which expanded to include the other, whoever the other is, especially if the other is different from me from a religious point of view. The participants also affirmed to respect the respect of differences and to consider love indeed not only symbols or mottos but practice. What this conference has achieved is really great and positive, and we hope that its positive effects and results will be seen in the future. But this has been a one step, and the first step for a continual work such as holding more common conferences and meetings, which will enrich the dialogue between the two religions, and it will give those meetings a strong motive to continue, so that the world will be able to understand Islam as a religion in the real sense of the word, and the world will understand that Islam calls for peace and moderation and middle position. Because of this, our dialogue must continue, because divine wisdom has decided to make human beings different and have different kinds of knowledge. And in order for the dialogue to achieve its purposes, which we hope are positive, dialogues have to be carried out according to the following customs. One is loyalty to God, faithfulness to God, have good intention towards God. And if we have this, then our dialogue will be sincere, our dialogue will be faithful, it will not have any hypocrisy, it will not seek to be well known or famous or seek personal benefits. Number two, acknowledging the other, accepting the difference with others. Number three is to be kind, or to dialogue in a kind way. And we have to be cautious that we should be kind and compassionate while carrying out this dialogue, as well as having patience and good words to each other. And in conclusion of my brief word, I would like to seize this opportunity to laud and praise what has been accomplished in this conference from the organizational point of view. We thank the administration of the center in this country for all its good efforts, for running this conference, for organizing the conference in a good way. We also thank them for their hospitality. We have also to praise the great work which was done by the Royal Al-Bayt Institute for Islamic Thought, and their great efforts in holding such good meetings. And I hope that God Almighty will give us success, and that the results of this conference will be good, and may God's peace be upon you.
Thank you, Dr. Alouini. I'd like to call up Reverend Dr. Geoffrey Tunnicliffe.
Well, good morning. I feel deeply honored to bring some closing observations at this historic event. Before I make my remarks, I want to express my deep appreciation to the organizers of this remarkable conference. In particular, I want to thank His Royal Highness Prince Ghazi, Professor Wolf, and Reverend Cummings for their leadership in bringing us together for this very timely dialogue. In addition, I also want to express my appreciation for all the staff and volunteers who have worked so hard and have demonstrated such wonderful hospitality to make our stay so very comfortable. So thank you. And as I begin my presentation this morning, I want to draw your attention to the screen to an unusual picture. Several years ago in Central America, there was a major hurricane and a storm that lasted for 5 days. During the course of this storm, over 100 inches of rain fell. As a result, there was massive flooding. When the waters receded, there were some remarkable changes in the landscape. In the picture, you will see a bridge in the foreground. However, the roads leading to the bridge are no more. In fact, the river itself, it's changed its very course. The bridge stood. I'm sure the Japanese engineers that built it were very proud. So the bridge that was created and built for a specific purpose no longer serves that purpose. A new bridge will have to be built. Can I suggest to you this morning, in the last number of years, there's been a major storm, or I should say storms, in our world. And these storms have created a new context for Christian and Muslim relationships. So we find ourselves in the need of new bridges. I believe this event, focused on loving God and neighbor in word and deed, is helping build such a bridge. As I look back on our time together, I'm able to affirm several ways in which the bridge is being built. Let me articulate for you some of the girders of this new bridge that's coming together. First of all, we can affirm the appropriateness of simply engaging in dialogue and conversation with each other at this critical time in history. It's right that we're together. Secondly, we can affirm the development of new and strengthened relationships. It has been good to sit together and build new friendships. It is important to drink tea together. Thirdly, we can affirm the genuine spirit of being willing to listen to each other and seeking to gain understanding into each other's perspectives. Fourthly, we can affirm the passion and the conviction that we have heard in each other's beliefs and values. Number 5, we can affirm our shared commitment in responding to the pressing needs of humanity. Number 6, we can affirm that we have found some new ways of expanding our mutual respect for each other. Number 7, we can affirm that we have taken some small steps in speaking the truth in love to one another. Number 8, we can affirm that while we have some deep theological differences, we also share common concerns for humanity. Number 9, we can affirm that we have the shared belief that as religious leaders, we bear a significant responsibility in influencing the people we lead to live lives that will promote common good in our societies. And number 10, we can affirm that this dialogue has been a positive and helpful start, but the process must continue and deepen. At this juncture in history, we as Christians and Muslims must find ways of working together in face of some of the major challenges on our planet. Let me outline a few of the most pressing issues that deserve our focused attention. First of all, extreme poverty that impacts the daily lives of billions of people. Secondly, environmental degradation that requires far greater care of the creation. Thirdly, the trafficking of human beings and new forms of modern slavery must be eradicated. We must bring an end to the suffering of the people in Darfur in Sudan. It was when we looked at Rwanda and we said, never again. We said, never again on our watch. And yet we've seen almost 400,000 people die. We must end the suffering, and we must do it together. Number 5, the scourge of HIV and AIDS that has left 40 million dead and 14 million orphans. And lastly, radical secularization that seeks to exclude or limit the influence of faith communities in the public discourse. These are some of the challenges we face. And surely the theme of this conference of loving God and neighbor in word and deed must cause us to respond to these pressing human issues. I'm reminded of some of the important scriptures that guide us in this matter. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 31, we read, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy." And that wonderful scripture found in Micah chapter 6, verse 8. "What does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God." As we look to the future, we must find ways of continuing to build the bridge. However, as His Royal Highness Prince Ghazi outlined at the beginning of this conference, we do face some significant challenges. Consequently, if we are going to build the bridge, we must face these challenges and deepen our reflection on key theological and ethical issues. Some of these include a deeper understanding of the love of God and neighbor, and the love of neighbor, and how it is embedded in our scriptures. Secondly, a deeper understanding and mutual respect for the sharing of our faith and how we see it contextualized in various cultural settings. Thirdly, a deeper and expanded view of human rights and religious freedom. As we move ahead into the future, we must continue to build greater understanding. This includes getting beyond the sensational headlines in our newspapers and our websites. During this conference, we have heard our Muslim friends feel they have been stereotyped and stigmatized in the media. As evangelical Christians, we feel the same stereotyping. I have the privilege of serving a global family of 420 million evangelical Christians. We are a diverse community of Christians, yet we are often portrayed through the media as being tied to one political agenda, one view of eschatology, and being totally intolerant of others. Can I say that is simply not the case? While we have a shared commitment to some core biblical truths, we also have a diversity of views on many issues. The reality is that the vast majority of evangelical Christians live in the global South, and with the current rate of growth of the church, that will become even more pronounced in the years to come. Just as we promise to seek more to move beyond the stereotyping of Muslims found in the media, can I ask you, my Muslim friends, to get to know us beyond what is reported in the newspapers and television programs? If we are going to continue to build new bridges, this must be a part of the architecture. As we look to the future, I want us to build strong bridges between our communities. Bridges that will be able to weather the storms that will continue to impact our world. Bridges that will carry our children and future generations. Bridges that will help us promote greater peace and understanding. However, it will take courageous and visionary leadership to accomplish this task. Our world is longing for hope. We, as people of deep religious faith, must become merchants of hope in a world of despair. So let us leave here with a shared commitment to continue to build these bridges and encourage each other in this noble task. For the sake of our children, for the sake of humanity, for God's sake, let us continue to build.
Thank you, Dr. Tunnicliffe. I'd like to call forward Dr. Bishari.
In the name of Allah, praise be to our blessings and peace of God be on our Prophet and his family, his companions, and on all prophets and messengers, and his two brothers, Moses and Jesus. May peace and blessings be upon him, as well as their followers. God says, "O people, we created you into a pair of a male and a female, and made you into tribes and nations so that you get acquainted to each other." This Quranic statement directed to all humankind, and despite of the difference with all their ethnicities, ages, and races, is basically meant in order for people to get acquainted to each other, so that mankind would know each other. In fact, the sessions of this conference indicated one basic thing, which is mankind really needs religion, and that man needs to be religious, and religiousness is the basis that social justice and human justice will prevail. All these messages and religious laws are united and have common grounds, some of which is the fact that the source of revelation is God, and the divine source of the revelation of all those messages. The second common ground is that the human origin is one and the same. And it was not sheer coincidence which caused the appearance of mankind. All those religious laws have the same grounds when they say that the family is the core of the society, homogeneity and happiness of mankind. So it's surprising when we see some clergymen accepting homosexual marriage. And in fact, God, exalted be He, created all religions and all mankind in order to live and develop the earth. And this is known in Islam as the theory of succession. And this actually indicates that development of the earth is the responsibility of all. Security is the responsibility of all. Clergymen needs, whether in churches, in synagogues, in mosques, they are called upon to call or to invite people to stand fast against terror and to help settle natural security and the safety and security of environment and earth. So what is our notion of love? This, whom God loves, humanity and mankind will definitely love. Any nation, any sect who will be meditating God and worshipping God, and then angels will be participating with them in their prayers, and God will give them blessings. The blessings which will be the guide for mankind to be saved of this materialistic hegemony. And we can hear in these days about the clash of civilization and establishment of the clash of civilization notion. Problem is, if we don't have religions, every person has a right to claim that he has the right religion. I would say that Islam is the best, is the right religion. But we have to dialogue. We have to speak to each other, because in this context, the context of our conference, I'm not preaching for my religion. Rather, we are having a dialogue with each other. We need to know how you think. And it is not necessary that you would recognize Islam. What we need is that we recognize the right of each person to differ, the right of each person to practice his religion. What we need, brothers and sisters, while we are moving towards salvation and communication, getting acquainted to each other, we need to have active discussion and communication so that we get acquainted to each other again and again. A Muslim, another Christian, a third Jew. But in fact, we believe that the origin of all those three religions is one. And all the religious laws integrate with each other. God says, we sent every messenger speaking the language of the nation he is preaching in so that he would make it clear for them. And I don't believe that there is any heavenly message that entrenches terror, war, or injustice. Rather, the basic message of heavenly messages is that to settle divine peace on earth. So the imbalance lies in the way we understand religion. Extremism was meant mainly getting closer to religion. And actually we do not deny anybody to come closer and to try to understand the divine text of God. But what we really deny is the misinterpretation of the religious text, because the function of the religion is how to establish a coherent social fabric in order to worship God. Yes, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, may God be pleased with him, says, while he's clarifying how to fear God, on the basis that divine fear is fear of God. And we know practically that when we say in Islam that I love you for the sake of God, or you say that you love me for the sake of God, we mean that this love would turn into a life project that would save mankind. And we also need to depend on the legislations that God revealed and which addresses every person individually. Those legislations were revealed in order to guide mankind and to be content that we all are partners and we all have to work together in order to maintain peace and security, natural peace and security. In fact, this injustice against nature is paid by mankind. And finally, I would like to mention Ali's statement when he was talking about the preparation for the Day of Judgment. He said that we have to be very careful to do everything that makes God be pleased with us in the Day of Judgment. The idea is always how we as clergymen, religious leaders, how we should work individually but within a framework of a collective effort that will achieve love. And let me finalize with the statement of a French philosopher when he says that dialogue, and he fears dialogue. He says that dialogues have become the opium of governments, meaning that if this dialogue remains between the leaderships only, or between the political circles or the official circles only, and it is not conveyed to the lay people, then this dialogue will be aimed only at getting acquainted to each other and just for slogans, but not actions. And this is not the function of dialogue. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bishari. We have time for maybe 2 comments or questions from the audience. I don't see the mics in the aisles, unfortunately. Are they there? Are there microphones there? What we may have to do, I don't know where there we are. Help is on the way. So the gentlemen that are queued up now will be the only people that we have time for. So please keep your comments and questions brief. Thank you. Sheikh Tamimi.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
I would like to extend appreciation for all the speakers for their presentations. I would like also to speak to the Mr. Rabbi, the Reverend Rabbi, and I'm saying that the Prophet, maybe peace and blessings of God be upon him, says, "This who harms his neighbors harms me, and who harms me harms God." And there are some practical applications for this. Islam did not set as a condition for extended generosity to any neighbors any preconditions in terms of religion, race, affiliations, or even color. Practical applications to this. For example, the Jew who used to throw rubbish in front of the Prophet's house when he one day he did not throw the rubbish in front of the house. At this day, the Prophet went to the Jew's house in order to see what happened to him. The Jew said, "Why have you, Muhammad, come to visit me?" Prophet said, "Because you did not put what you used to put, so I thought you were sick." The Jew said, "Does your religion enjoin you to do that?" The Prophet said, "And more than that even." Other examples says that the Prophet used to send some of the meat whenever he used to slay a lamb to his neighbors. In Palestine, actually, a third example. I have a certain endowment for my grandfather who lives in a certain place in Palestine. There are other various examples for the good treatment of neighbors, and especially Jews. But what is happening now in Palestine is completely different, it's completely opposite to whatever texts you mentioned from the Torah. You mentioned some texts from the Torah and from the statements of the rabbis, which enjoins good treatment of neighbors. But what is happening nowadays of killing children and old people and women in Palestine, or even preventing Palestinian Muslims and Christians from performing prayers in their places of worship, confiscating lands and demolishing properties goes completely against whatever you have said. That's why I'm calling upon the rabbis to apply Torah and to stick to the scriptures and to say the truth and to say to the government of Israel that whatever they are doing is completely against Judaism.
Word, please.
First of all, Sheikh Tamimi, it's nice to see you again. We've met before in Doha twice, and I am delighted to see you here. I want to suggest that the failure to love our neighbors as ourselves is not an isolated phenomenon to Christians, Jews, Muslims, or secularists. And I certainly agree with the Sheikh that that failure is broad and significant around our world, and I, in that sense, join with you in sharing the concern. I also, because time is brief, will do this. Personally, we've met, we've spoken before, and you're now an hour from my house and where I live, and I hope that you will accept the invitation. I think I sent you a letter a couple of years ago inviting you to come and to be with me and to pursue our dialogue together in my home.
Thank you, Rabbi Krantz. We'll go to this microphone and then...
To speak into the microphone, please. Ask him to speak into the microphone. Actually, I'm ready to respond to your invitation. I live in Jerusalem, and you live in Jerusalem. But actually, I'm prevented from entering Jerusalem and going to his home, and he knows that. Israel brought me into court, claiming that I was seditioning people because I went to Al-Aqsa Mosque to perform prayers. I'm ready to meet this invitation if he enables me to enter Jerusalem.
Informed me that he actually lives in Armonk, New York, which is just about an hour and a half from here. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Tony Kyriopoulos, and I'm with the National Council of Churches here in the United States. And this is more of a comment that's not a response to the breadth of the participants here this morning at this panel and also to come in the next panel, and also in response to the question that I've been hearing while here, well, what are we going to do next, or where are we going from here? The National Council of Churches has been involved in Christian-Muslim dialogue for some 30 years. And since 9/11, that relationship has become much more intensive. The dialogue has become much more intensive. And it was formalized this year in an ongoing national dialogue with our friends at the Islamic Society of North America, the Islamic Circle of North America, and the African American Muslim community. And the intent is to take the experience of our national dialogue to the grassroots level. In the fall, the National Council of Churches will be issuing its own response to the Common Word document. We decided to go on a one-year theological study of the issues that were presented in the document, and after 1 year to issue a response from the churches of the United States, not just from individuals, but from the churches that make up the National Council of Churches. There are 35 national churches that are part of that. And so together, ecumenically, we'll be responding to the document. The intent is there to take that document and that response to the local congregations so that mosques and churches and local communities around the country can work together on these issues, can wrestle with these issues, and come to peace and harmony in local communities. And so out of the breadth of the Christian communities, particularly that are here, as well as the breadth of the Muslim communities represented, I'm looking forward to the National Council of Churches working with all of these communities that have heretofore not necessarily been at the same tables, but to find ways to work together so that from this conference we can all move forward together so that we can really make an impact, all the Christian communities and all the Muslim communities here in this country, to achieve peace and reconciliation, which are the goals that we are here to work for. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kyriopoulos. Mr. Maloufi.
Very much the spirit of this conference, all the speakers, but I am tortured inside because of the pain going on in the world. When I look what's going on in Iraq, 7 million refugees, 2 inside the country, 5 outside the country, what's going on in Palestine, what's going on in Darfur, what's happened in Twin Tower, all this pain and the culture of hatred going on in the world today. Everybody hated each other. And we're talking about the love. What means love? It's word, it's commitment, it's decision. It's something we have to throw ourselves into it and make it work. It's not something we talk about it, but something we act in it. Something happened in my life one time. I was sitting in the airport in Los Angeles after 9/11, and I'm reading Arabic paper. A rabbi passed by me, looked at me, very antagonistic look. Maybe I look criminal. My mother-in-law thinks so. And he sat by himself. Now I start thinking what I have to do. I gathered some courage and I went to him. I said, "Hi, would you be kind? I need some help to help me. Give me a few minutes from your time." He hesitated. He said, "Sit down." I sat down with him. I said, "Look, you're a godly man. And you know you're a prophet what he says. What required from you, O man, to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God." A godly man, how you cope with this situation going on in Palestine. Every time I heard about Jewish being hurt, I been hurt myself. Every time I hear Palestinian hurt, I hurt by myself. How you cope in it? And we start talking. After 40 minutes, we departed in tears with each other. Who is your enemy? The one you don't know. Who is your friend? The one you know. Every person in the world, he is your friend. He is a stranger, but a friend you didn't have the opportunity to meet yet. We are the guest of God in this world. And we have to act as the guest of God with his children wherever we walk. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Sharif,
Thank you very much.
I know you will be brief for,
Yes, very
for us.
quickly.
Thank you.
ملاحظتين سريعتين.
2 comments. First, the question of mutual acknowledgement. We cannot be quiet about this basic point because we acknowledge these things, and this is true that we have to acknowledge each other. This is especially true for our Christian brothers who say that Christ,
Jesus Christ says that you will know the people from their fruits, and actually Islam also is a tree which yielded a lot of good fruits. So the issue of recognition does not refer to a full recognition. However, we have to think that this is a religion, a pure religion. And the issue of recognition should be considered without any kind of compromises that go against the foundations of our religions, our principles. The second thing, every religion has its own circles. The first circle of Islam is the Islamic nation. Second, that's the believers. The third circle is the human circle. Christianity has the certain other circles. That's the circle of Catholics and certain circle of humans. The Jews have two circles, the circle of Jews and the circle of humanity. Those circles give us some opinion of opening up to the others.
Thank you, Dr. Sharif. Sheikh Shukur.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
In the name of God, most merciful, compassionate, it is a word shows the purpose behind all religions. God told Adam, evil has appeared in this, and Adam's son killed his brother, and man was proud against each other and made each other slaves. The messengers of God, Most High, came to show people there is a higher power controlling the whole world, and they wanted an improvement of life and honoring people. All religions came to support man in this world. The movements of man in the world and are organized, and according to the movements in the whole world, all these human movements are many kinds are organized in this way. If we came back to the beginning, go back to the beginning, man's pride in making slaves of each other, these disasters are happening where thousands of people are getting killed just for benefit of different people. These things in Darfur and these other things that make us cry are happening because the leaders are making decisions based on benefits. People are killed. One president of a company is making decisions so that people are killed. The religions themselves do not contradict each other. There is a call back to the basis that we fear God among people, and that we fear God among the religions, and that we not focus on our personal interests.
I was
only 1 minute, sir,
yes.
Please.
I was going to give my comments later, but when I looked at there's no Q&A in the next session.
That's correct. This is the last.
I want to share one thing with my. The first time I hosted a banquet in Amman, Jordan, I was criticized by a Christian colleague. And he said, why? Why would you spend so much money on inviting and hosting an iftar for Muslims? 250 Muslims. This could have been spent somewhere else for charity. I went to him and I wanted to seek his wisdom. And I said, you know what? I looked in the Holy Bible, in the Old and the New Testaments, and there is no a word that talks about the Lord Jesus Christ hosting iftar to Muslims. And I think I made a big mistake. He said he was happy to see that I am apologizing, but he said, you are mixing things. Islam came 632 years after Christianity. There were no Muslims. I said, yes. But when Jesus came, there were no Christians also. Last year in Boston, part of the program which I developed with the United States U.S. State Department, where I led groups of Muslim imams. Maybe this sounds strange for a Christian to lead Muslim imams to come to America and to speak about their Islam and learn about the pluralism and diversity in an American society. One imam, he whispered in my ears and he said, when we were getting ready to send them for homestays for a weekend, he comes to me and he says, these people, they know who we are, but we don't know who our hosts are. Are they Jews? I said, I don't know, because it's very impolite in the American society to ask someone about their religion. One thing, so I don't want to be an impolite. Number two, why you feel so sensitive about going to a Jewish home? I thought you were coming here to talk about the tolerant Islam. The home that is accepting you, inviting you, receiving you, they are opening their doors and their hearts to you. So we ended up at the hotel where the hosts were Jewish. It was a Jewish rabbi from Boston. And I whispered in the imam's ear, I said, do you want to be a Muslim more than the Prophet Mohammed, who dealt with the Jews? That was Friday evening. We went to, he went to the Jewish home. He attended the Shabbat service. Sunday afternoon, when they brought him back to the hotel with the others, I saw tears in everybody's eyes, the Muslims and the Christians and the Jews. What I'm saying is we need, not as it was mentioned here, we need to go down to the level of the common people. We are here talking about a common world. We want to be with the common people. We don't want to go down to them. Sometimes these people, I think, they had in practice, they have loved God and loved their neighbor. We as people, as leaders, we need to get to them the right message and set the example. Many of them, they are doing this without being very academic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Bishari will just
Dr. Bishari, 30 ثانية.
Lombard to moderate our keynote addresses.
شكرا.
Actually, the second article of the French Constitution stipulates that France is a secular republican country which does not recognize religions but knows all religions, meaning that recognition is something and knowing a religion is something else. My religion will not be complete except when we recognize that Christianity is a religion, Judaism is a religion, and that Moses and Jesus are messengers and prophets. But does Judaism recognize Christianity? It doesn't. Rather, it takes or considers Jesus as a reformer. Christianity as well does not recognize Islam, because if Christianity does, all Christians would turn Muslims. So, what we need here is, are we propagating and in a missionary campaign? Are we in a missionary campaign here? Or are we trying to find common ground so that we build peaceful life for our people? So, I'm not here, I don't want to engage in polemics. I am calling here for respect, that you respect me and respect my right to exist and my right to differ. But the idea of recognition of Islam as a religion, that would be great. But this is not necessary now. Actually, Muslims do not have any problem here, because they will not be true Muslims until they recognize Judaism and Christianity and the fact that God revealed the Torah and the Bible, and that Muhammad is the last of prophets and messengers. But in the context of this dialogue, we are not discussing the doctrine, we are not discussing the creed. My doctrine is complete monotheism, is tawheed, while you're believing in Trinity and so on. But actually we are just trying to find the common ground, the common aspects in order for the religion to act as it was meant by God. In fact, this might be some kind of polemics, ideas of missionary campaigns, what's happening here, but what is meant by true dialogue is how to find common ground in order to make mankind happy. And thank you very much.
Their presentations.